You good? All right, I think we're good to go.
Hello.
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 How you all doing? Excellent.
Great to see so many of you here.
Yeah,
Not
last year we
expected
had like 3 people because we were on at the same time as the 1.9 like announcement panel, which kind of sucked. We got a video of like a Mexican wave with just the 3 people on the end, just sort of going. Woo!
All right, so in case you're in the wrong room, welcome to the Enhancing Vanilla Minecraft with Command Blocks panel. So those of you who made the mistake can walk out now. Let some other people in, I guess. My name is Sliced Lime. I'm going to be trying to mediate this thing. Way over at the edge there, we have Samusar6.
Everyone.
Don't know if they heard you.
Is your mic working?
Check your mic there.
Hello. Okay.
There we go. And then we have John Pot,
Hello, everybody.
Sparks from Accidental Games,
Hi.
and Crazy Man.
Hey.
So, I think we can start with some quick introductions for those of you who haven't followed us for a while. Am I getting some feedback? I don't know if you can sort that out from the back or if I need to do something up here. We'll try, we'll keep going, hope it improves. So we'll do some introductions for you to start off with. I'm Sliced Lime, as I said. I've done Minecraft stuff on a YouTube channel for about almost 2 years. Command block stuff, that's where I started out. Done new stuff, done redstone survival, but command blocks is my home. That's what I've done. I'm also a professional game developer. I've been developing games for 11 years. So I've been trying to use that when I make stuff in Minecraft too. Why don't you carry on?
Okay, I'm Crazy Man from Accidental Games. I've helped Sparks develop some of the Game Mode 4 modules that have been released and been quite popular amongst various people. Yeah. Other than that, I just derp around a bit on Minecraft. That's about it.
Yeah, I'm Sparks. I share the YouTube channel with Crazy Man. We work on Game Mode 4 together. We've got a server. I just do sort of technical command blocking and goof around like everyone else. That's what Minecraft's for, right?
I'm John Pot. I'm a map maker. I made some modules before. I work with Crazy Man and Sparks on the Game Mode 4 server, and yeah. Sam?
Hey everyone, I'm Sam, known in-game as Samusar6, and I'm a Minecraft map maker. I also do sort of 3D block modeling, so working with resource packs and all of that, and trying to combine those sort of resource pack elements into vanilla Minecraft and making command blocks work with them.
All right, so Crazy Man and Sparks already mentioned Game Mode 4. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically almost a mod system for vanilla, you could say. Yeah?
Yeah, it's a group of sort of command blocks that enhance the game in a way that you'd usually use mods to do.
Specifically for survival, with an aim to balance it to make the game, you know, so you don't get to the end game too quickly. Quick show of hands, actually, who has heard of Game Mode 4? Oh, good, at least one hand.
I saw several, so at least 4 or 5. So that's pretty good. Would you say that I guess that's what you guys are most famous for?
Yeah,
There was a good 5 hands.
That's a good 5 hands. Good.
Always good.
Sam, do you have something that you, what is your most notable achievement?
I guess I'm probably most known for my first ever map, which was called Planetary Confinement.
That's some recognition. Who has heard of that?
All right, so that was probably the first ever map that I kind of actually put time and effort into, and it was really popular. I was kind of not expecting it, but I think I posted quite a lot of it on Reddit and everything, and kind of gained a following from that, and then YouTubers and everyone was all looking forward to that, so it was pretty cool. All
right. John?
I run a small series called John Pot's Magic. It's a collection of modules similar to Game Mode 4. It enhances the game. I had a module that would add new fruits to trees, and you could have a blender and make different sorts of smoothies.
That sounds awesome.
Very expensive. Just to clarify, by the way, when we say a module, what we're talking about is a self-contained collection of command blocks that are being put into a Minecraft world to change how it behaves.
All right, and what was that?
You're hearing things.
I'm hearing things, apparently.
Ignore the voices in your head and just...
I'm going to try to keep the voices in my head separate from the voices from outside my head. Apologies if I don't. I guess the thing I'm most known for is something called the Predator, which was a recreation of sort of the Predator armor inside Minecraft. Something I did for my 1,000 subscriber special. It was a bit of a crazy project. It ended up containing, I can't even remember anymore, but it was something around 147,000 command blocks. Runs decently as long as you don't stand next to them. But it basically sampled the colors of blocks around you, and then it would mash those colors together to color the pieces of your armor that you were wearing, something that matched the surroundings. So you sort of blended in as you moved around. Pretty cool result, ridiculously big command block system. When we prepared for this panel, we sort of gathered up a few questions from people on my channel, from people on Twitter, from around the place. And one of the very common questions was, like, basically, how did you get started with command blocks? And as a sort of follow-up to that is then, how do I get started? If you haven't done command block stuff before, like, how did you guys get started? And what would you say, like, what's your tip for people who want to get into command blocks? Nobody?
I'll start then. So I actually got started in a sort of weird way. If you remember back after the 1.8 update, there was a server software called Bucket, and that was actually DMCA'd, so it means you couldn't really use it anymore. And so I decided that after watching people like Seth Bling and Dragnoz, that I would try and set up my own sort of server, because I've been a server owner for quite a while. And I thought I might be able to set up my own sort of server using command blocks to act as a sort of replacement for plugins. And I sort of just messed around for a while, and eventually came up with some pretty cool things, posted some pictures and videos over to Reddit, where I got most popular from. And after that, just started a YouTube channel and kind of quit being a server owner, because command blocks is just way more fun than hosting anything.
I think watching videos like command block tutorials and things is a really good way to get started. The way I got into it was I wanted to make a mini game. So set yourself a simple task, something that's maybe just something that sounds interesting, and work out how to do it, kind of break it down into steps. That's sort of how you get into command blocks, I guess. There's a few tutorial series out there on YouTube if you just look for a command block tutorial series. I think Slice Slime actually has a simple and an advanced command block tutorial.
Yes, I do.
On his
I do have a
channel,
beginner's commands
a good place
tutorial.
to go look.
I guess for my part, I did exactly the opposite. I did the stupid thing of setting myself a very, very difficult task rather than something that seems achievable. So I went, hey, these command blocks have become quite powerful. I should try to make a chess game. So that's the first thing I did. It's the very first video on my YouTube channel is me showcasing very, very awkwardly this chess game. And this was basically after, I think, 3 or 4 months of working on this thing, trying to piece together different ways of working with command blocks, starting from basically nothing. I watched tutorials. I watched some Seth Bling tutorials, some live streams, looked up a whole bunch of information on the Minecraft wiki page about commands. It's a very good resource. But yeah, I also have a tutorial series. So if you look up beginner commands on YouTube, you should find it. So one other question that I see a fair bit is, like, how does command blocks and writing commands relate to writing code? And because I am a programmer, I know coding, and I've done that for a while before I got into commands, and people wonder how much is there similarities and differences, and how much does one lead into the other. And for me personally, knowing concepts of code have been very helpful because it lets me understand how commands are structured very easily. But I think it works the other way too. I know several of my viewers have started out with command blocks and have then learned to program and learned to code. Because they know commands by then, it becomes easier to pick up coding concepts, and that lets you develop your skills further and lets you do a lot of things. And you started out with just playing a game, you're doing stuff in Minecraft, and now suddenly you know something that actually could, down the line, lead you to a job. I don't know how you guys see on that. Do you have any input on? You know code, right, Sparks?
I started as a programmer and sort of came to command blocks from it, but I found it quite different to learn in many ways. Although it does have certain similarities to something like Scratch, which is sort of a block by block sticking sections together kind of thing, which is a very similar feel, especially to the new 1.9 command blocks, where you're just sort of putting them in a chain one after another. So it has some similarities to that.
It's quite a good way of learning sort of the process and like the logic of programming if you're using command blocks.
Yeah.
You sort of learn a lot of
command blocks
that
have a very visual step-by-step flow, especially in 1.9, where you can see exactly which order everything happens in. So they have similarities and differences. I don't really know what else to say about it.
All right, so a lot of people are trying to get into command blocks. A lot of people are starting out. So what would you say is the most common mistakes that people do when they start up making their own command block contraptions and systems?
Starting with chess.
It was a bad one, but I don't know if it's common.
Common mistakes. I don't know if I'm being a bit too advanced with it, but there's different kinds of command blocks. There's and you can run them at different speeds. So with 1.9, there's the new 20 hertz, the purple blue repeating command block, which runs every command on its chain 20 times a second. And there's a real habit of people starting with command block contraptions to just stick everything on as fast as you can. Which is fine for small projects, but when you're getting bigger, you start to run into a problem where the game is trying to process everything 20 times a second, something like looking for grass under a player, a certain type of block under a player or something, when really you could cut that down, even just halving it to 10 hertz per second. People think that command blocks are more efficient now, which means that you can get away with running lots and lots of things at once, which can be a real issue. So making sure that you only run commands when you need to, so have like separate lines of command blocks which are triggered only when a certain thing happens, really cuts down on lag and things caused by command block contraptions. And also running a command as infrequently as you need to if it needs to run continuously. So most of the contraptions I do actually work on, like they run once a second or something instead of 20 times a second. And that 20 times a second cycle for a command block is something that I'll use as a last resort if I can't get away with doing it slower.
I agree. I think that beginners, when they start using command blocks, they'll put everything on a line. And when you have a small scale, that does work, but it's once you start building up more and more that performance really becomes an issue, and conditional lines and slow clocks are more necessary.
I guess so. Adding on to that, one of the issues that I have quite a lot is thinking about the order in which to put commands and the order in which the command blocks go, and whether you need conditional command blocks or whether you can just get away with just using the normal ones. And I suppose the difficulty is it's hard to sort of debug sometimes, because you can have the correct commands and everything, but if they're in that wrong order, then they'll work differently to how you're sort of expecting them to work. So sometimes you have to just go through step by step, looking at each one and just trying to think in your head what is happening at that sort of moment, and then just fix the order from there. And I think in 1.9 it's a lot better now because you've got the chain command blocks and everything. You don't have to worry about fill clocks and all that. But yeah, so I just recommend checking for the order and also check for typos as well.
Actually, quite a lot of people who come to me saying my command blocks aren't working, help. They've forgotten to turn one of the clocks on. So it's always worth checking that. I've done it too. It's very, especially with the new command blocks, they don't physically look like they're on or off. So sometimes people will notice that it's set to not run or something like that. So that's always worth checking.
And if I may add, another common mistake that I usually see a lot is people forget to turn the track output for command blocks out. Command blocks, when you first place them, have an output line telling you if the command is successful, if it's failing, how many things it's finding, and leaving that on in big projects causes a lot of block updates, which leads to major performance issues. I believe you made a tool that will mass convert command blocks to track output 0.
Yeah, I've got a little command block thing which lets you just click on a load of command blocks and it'll set the track output off for you. So when you're not debugging, turn it off and it really does help with performance, especially on servers.
It's a pretty good one. I think another thing that I've seen people doing a lot of mistakes is having their selectors be wide. So when you're making command blocks, you can select things like the closest player or all the entities in the world. And obviously, it's fairly obviously cheaper to select the closest player or the closest 3 players or something like that than it is to select every entity in the world. And a lot of people, when they start out, will do things to every entity in the world. And if you do that and then you start getting many entities, you run into severe performance issues.
Large radiuses. People trying to select entities with like 100 block square radius.
Yeah.
Not square radius, a round radius. But yeah, that's a very taxing for the game to perform. So I try to avoid using radiuses larger than 5 blocks or something if I can avoid it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things to think about with command blocks is to try to be very precise. And it kind of goes opposed to what your intuition is when you begin, because you want to go like, I'll add an extra few just to make sure that it works. But in the end, that can hurt you quite severely because now you end up doing things to many other things, and it can scale horribly bad when you run a command for each thing, and then that command in turn runs a command for each thing, and it can blow out of proportions very quickly.
Yeah. Some command block systems scale. For example, in the Game Mode 4 series, there's a custom crafter, which lets you put down a block and craft your own custom recipes inside it. And each of those has got an armor stand sat inside. And as you put more and more custom crafters down, as we found on our public server where people have been building hundreds of them, every command is scaling and executing on every armor stand you have. So one of the solutions we found for that is to detect when a custom crafter is empty, when there's no blocks inside it, and then basically changing the name or the tag of the armor stand so that your selectors ignore it. So that way you're no longer performing most of your checks on those armor stands, and you're just doing one check to see if a new item's been placed inside. Then you change the tag back and include it in your scan. So things like that, sort of really limiting your selectors, using the new tags or using custom names can actually really help you with performance as well in that respect.
Yeah.
So now we've sort of touched on that several times. We've talked about the new command blocks in 1.9. So we should maybe talk a little bit about the differences of making command block stuff in 1.8 as opposed to 1.9 and 1.10. So do you want to start a bit on that, Sparks? Or?
I can do, yeah. Well, yeah, the huge difference is the fact that it's chained, and you no longer need a fill line to do a 20 hertz clock. Which is very useful because you don't have block updates anymore, or you can turn them off completely, which is really nice. Hands up, who's heard of Rule 63 regarding command blocks? Nobody. Oh no, there's 1 or 2, 3, 4 hands, a couple of hands. So back in 1.8, it was the case that if more than 63 block updates happened in a Minecraft chunk in one game tick, which is a 20th of a second, then the entire chunk would be updated and sent to the client, which would cause a huge performance hit. So we were always trying to keep our command blocks in our contraptions under 63 within a chunk, which means you have to spread things out more. But because we can turn track power output off in the new command blocks and chain them, you can pack as many as you like into a chunk, and you don't get the entire chunk streamed to the client, just the blocks which are being changed. So that's a real advantage with those. You can really pack things tighter and coiling them up. Things are a lot smaller now, which is nice, which is a big difference.
Another major change in the recent updates were the addition of tags, which would lead to a decrease in the use of scoreboards. Scoreboards would allow you to assign a number to an entity. But now with tags, you can actually edit the NBT data of them and just target that, which would really save on space and scoreboard usage.
Another thing about the difference between 1.8 and 1.9, which isn't so much on the actual command side of things, is other game mechanics are updated with each patch. And this does have a habit of completely unbalancing and breaking some of your command block contraptions. As you can tell by Sparks' face. If you've... I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. If I know prepared. If you've got something that is quite end game that you're sort of working towards, and then a new update comes along where all of a sudden you can very easily get like chain armor all of a sudden. If they made an update where you can craft it, and you had in one of your custom crafter recipes the fact you need chain armor, all of a sudden you can get end game armor fairly quickly and fairly early on, and that can completely ruin what was quite an enjoyable module.
Does anyone want to talk about structure blocks?
Oh yeah, structure blocks. I haven't really played with them much, to be honest. Has anyone had a little bit of a play with it?
A bit, but honestly not that much.
I think I've been thinking about them more than I've actually used them and experimented with them, and I think there are a fair number of things that you could do with them that I've sort of wanted to do but haven't had time to do, that could unlock quite a lot of potential with things that we can't do right now, but like using only command blocks, but that we could potentially do with structure blocks. So I think there's a lot of hidden potential in structure blocks that we will find down the line as people are doing more and more structure blocks stuff and finding out more and more interesting properties about them.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of structure blocks is you can sort of fit a sort of command module inside a structure and then actually send those structure files to players, and then they can pretty easily install them into their own worlds. So with in-one commands kind of thing, you are limited to a certain number of characters, but with structure blocks, you're just limited to a 32 cubed area, which is a lot sort of less limiting.
And I've not played with it, but I've also heard that you can put structures inside of structures, which would, like, so you load in a structure and that has a structure block in it, and that would load another structure. Yeah. So really, you're not that confined at all, really.
All right, so we move on a little bit to something Crazy Man mentioned here. We're talking about game updates that break your game balance. And one of the things that a lot of people, when I asked on my channel, wanted me to sort of bring up in this panel was, how do game design, basically, game design and game balancing come into effect when you're making command block things? And I think there are two things that command blocks are being used to primarily do currently. One is like maps, which basically you find on Realms. You'll find you can download stuff. There are a lot of famous maps that use command blocks to implement special things, special mechanics for those maps, and they are, they have to fit into the map, but they don't really need to fit into the game as a whole. So then it becomes a simple matter of balancing what you want for your map and making sure that that works in that context. And the other big use case for command blocks is showcases. So you have people making a Superman outfit or a Spider-Man outfit or this fancy robot mechanic, and it doesn't have to fit into the game at all. Like, it's a showcase thing, you do it, it's super cool, and then you put it down and you never look at it again. Sort of the thing that what my Predator thing was. It was a showcase, it doesn't have a crafting recipe, it doesn't fit into the game. You just get this armor, you walk around, it's cool, you go, ooh, and then it's done. Like, you forget about it and you move on. Something that the Game Mode 4 project and the stuff that John has been doing, and some of the things that I've been doing, is modules that actually fit into the game of Minecraft, that kind of extend it in the way that mods do, but in a vanilla context. And it becomes much more important then to have something that actually balances together with the game. And it's something that most command blockers probably don't even consider, but that we spend a lot of thought on. I don't know if you have more thoughts about that.
Yeah, with Game Mode 4, from the beginning we wanted it to sort of all be working together, or potentially working together. And so you've got to not only think about how something's going to affect the gameplay when you install that module, but how other modules are going to affect that. Like if you've got something that will get you diamonds really quickly, and something that requires a lot of diamonds, but then sort of gives you superpowers. Having one or the other may work really well, but having them together is just going to end up giving you sort of end game stuff really quick. That's something we've always tried to avoid.
Players who use it have continued to astound us by finding ways to exploit the stuff we've done. As hard as we try, people work out. Actually, he's one of the worst. He keeps getting to the end game in like first 10 minutes of a new world or something. It's ridiculous. But yeah, when we're working on a new command block contraption for Game Mode 4. The majority of the time is definitely not putting the command blocks together. It's trying to work out how people are going to break it.
Yeah.
And how it could affect the gameplay. Because we're really keen on extending the survival experience rather than helping people get to the end game faster. So there's a lot of thought put into how different things are going to interact with each other, and whilst making it fun at the same time still to play.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where every time you're adding something fun and exciting, which is the interesting bit that everyone appreciates, you also have to take away something so it's just not massively overpowered. I think Undead Players is quite a good example of this. When you die, a zombie is spawned and picks up all your items, or the majority of them, particularly the armor, which means that stuff is saved, and if you can't get back there in 5 minutes, your stuff's still there, which is great. But now you have a heavily armored zombie that you need to kill with your spare stuff, which is usually like a wood sword for me.
Yeah.
One thing that I do quite a bit is making sort of ambient sort of effects and like adding new mobs to the game or something which don't necessarily do anything else other than just make the world feel more alive. So one thing was the butterflies that I made using armor stands and bats. And that looked really cool. And I think just adding small things like that using command blocks can be sort of really aesthetic in your world. And things like fireflies, using XP orbs. But yeah, I think there's not necessarily any issues with game balance there. It's just sort of making aesthetic things which kind of just look cool.
Yeah, slightly off topic, but it's odd how many people don't want us to use resource packs. They say it's not vanilla, which it is, because it's part of vanilla, but people say that if you've done it with a resource pack or a model or something, then you've cheated, which is a bit of a shame, because I'd like to play with it more, but we've kind of avoided using resource packs for Game Mode 4 because people don't like them.
Yeah.
Not everyone, of course, but some people don't like them.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of advantages to the Game Mode 4 stuff is that it is fairly simple to install. A lot of them are just on sort of a single command, one click, which is what attracts people to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that the command blocks really do excel on, because you kind of strip away the balance issue completely, going back to what Sam was talking about, adding things that aren't really, they don't affect the game so much, but they make the game more varied, they make the game experience more interesting. So his butterflies, I've made a few of those where it doesn't really do anything, but it's spectacular, like having explosions instead of just destroying a few blocks and that's it, having them actually spit out the blocks, throw them away as debris across, which is really a super cool experience, but it doesn't really change the gameplay balance in any way.
Yeah, it's been getting better through the years, but Minecraft is still feels kind of slightly ghost towny and dead. So sort of visual moving aesthetics are always a pleasure to see in the game when people add them.
So we've been talking a little bit about this, but we can get into it a little bit further. Is a comparison between command blocks and the stuff that we do in vanilla and mods and plugins on the other hand. And I think you're on one important aspect of that, which is it's easy for everybody to get it. If you join a server with the command block system, especially if it doesn't use resource packs, then all you need to do is connect to the server, and you're in that world. You're in with those new rule sets, and you have all of the things that the creator wanted you to have is right there, and you don't have to install anything, and it doesn't go on your computer in any way. But then obviously there are flip sides. Anybody want to say something about that? I mean, Sam did the first map there, which is essentially if you haven't played it, go play it, Planetary Confinement. And if you've heard about it, it's a sort of vanilla-ish take on the same environment that the map Crash Landing does, which is a modded map.
Yeah, so I think from a creative side, there is quite a big difference between doing modding and doing command blocks. I think the biggest thing is it's easier to get into doing command blocks. You can start really simple and then sort of just work your way up from there. But with mods, you kind of need to sort of have a knowledge of Java and how to call different functions. And so unless you have experience in Java or JavaScript or even another programming language, it might not necessarily be as easy. But again, modding is less limiting in what you can do, whereas with command blocks, you kind of just have to use what's in-game already and sort of make that work for you and your contraptions.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to get into command blocks than it is modding. And that's sort of the developer side of the developer and the user relationship that both mods and command blocks have. As Sliceline was saying, if you have a command block server, then the client doesn't need anything special to connect. And while there are sort of server-only mods and plugins, such as Spigot and Bucket as examples, which a vanilla client can connect to, it's also easier for a server owner. You need less knowledge, I think, to set up a command block system than to set up a Spigot mod or something like that for most users, I'd say.
Not to mention the fact that it is still a vanilla thing, so you could, for instance, it's just a map, so anybody can download it. It could go on Realms, for instance, which I think Sam has some maps on Realms. I do as well. Yeah. So it's easy to use it in a custom map and then just throw that out there. It can be used anywhere. It can be used on a server. It can be put on Realms. It can be put anywhere. And it's no special requirements, really. But then, of course, it is, I would say, if you know how to code, the sort of the language of command blocks has some really, really difficult quirks to it, which means that sometimes you end up just stuck trying to debug something really terribly complicated because you're trying to do something at the edge of what's possible, and it turns out to be really, really complicated, even if it is possible.
Yeah, it's far more limiting in command blocks, I think. But in many ways, I really enjoy that. It's nice to have this what looks really simple, but turns out to be like practically impossible, and trying to work out how to get it to work. That's something I really like about working with command blocks. I mean, like, it's working it out. The process is frustrating. Like, oh man, yeah.
Yeah, when I'm creating something, I'm just at the very start. I have an end goal in my head. I know exactly what I want to. But I agree, it's really fun just completing the challenge of figuring out how you want to complete that.
Interestingly, using commands instead of mods is almost kind of quite popular for some reason at the moment. Our server runs purely command blocks for all of the quirky things we have on it. In the past, we've discussed converting some of the command blocks to plugins for Spigot instead. And a lot of people have sort of said, no, we actually would prefer to play with the command blocks. I guess there's a certain...
It's almost a natural feel to it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a bit of purity to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, some people just like that pure vanilla feel, even with sort of additions to the game.
Yeah, I think it's also somehow easier to understand for some people. Like, they can see the command blocks, they see things doing stuff, even if they don't know how exactly it's working, they can see it's working. Whereas with sort of mods and plugins, it's more sort of background work that's not really seen and is a bit less intuitive.
Just to give sort of a flip view, we're not saying mods are terrible. I mean, they have their place, I guess. But one advantage to mods is that if you are a developer, it's easier to make something that's efficient and better for the client than with command blocks. So you've got to work a lot harder for every scrap of efficiency you can get out of it, because command blocks are inherently crap at performance.
Well, I would say there's also certain fields, certain parts of the game that are sort of off limits, at least currently, to command blocks. Like it's almost impossible to make something that is a custom user interface.
Or a new mob.
New mob
Proper biome detection.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long list, actually, of things that are somewhere on the scale of extremely hard to impossible. Something like the Predator thing that I mentioned that I made, which ends up, it's a fairly simple idea. You're doing some detection of blocks, you're doing some math, you're applying it to an item, and you end up with 147,000 command blocks. Something is clearly not quite right there. So some things that you kind of want to do, I mean, I fairly often start with an idea of, I would like to do this, and I explore like 4 or 5 different ways of doing it, and then I end up going like, nah, none of these are really good enough. Because I kind of get it to work, but then there's lag and glitches and stuff, or I don't make it work at all. So that, to me, is the most frustrating part about command blocking, is like, you get something like, it's so close to being so awesome, but it turned out to be nothing at all, because you can't close that little gap. And that's super frustrating, and that's something that mods obviously don't have, because they can do whatever. They also have an advantage when it comes to the game balance that we were talking about, because like as command blocker, you can basically add things in, but you can't really remove game mechanics. You can't really change the game mechanics in some ways. So you make a new way to make armor, but you can't replace the way to make armor. And that is sometimes a fairly difficult thing to deal with when you've got these awesome new systems that you want to make, but you can't really balance them because you can't take away the ability to make the normal stuff.
I think adding on to what Slice Line was saying, sort of game mechanics that are already in the game cause quite an issue when you're trying to make a sort of completely custom adventure map, like Planetary Confinement, for example. I had to do a lot of sort of thinking of how people could abuse certain things. And even in the end, I missed a few things and people managed to figure ways around stuff. But yeah, thinking about what's already in game and trying to prevent players from necessarily abusing that in an adventure map is pretty important.
I'm making a map right now, and there's a problem because I'm trying to freeze a character, but there's a bug where you can sprint and jump at the same time, just mash on the spacebar, and you can actually move quite quickly. And it's a real problem right now, and we're trying to find a way around it.
All right, just trying to keep track of what the time is. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how hard it is to make command block systems perform well. I think we can delve a bit deeper into that as well. Sparks likes to talk at length about that. If you want to get into it in some?
I can't hear you very well. Could you say that again?
Okay. Performance. If I just say that one word and say go.
Performance. I did kind of go into it a little bit earlier, didn't I? I feel like I've already kind of ranted out on that one.
All right, you've done your rant.
Yeah,
I'll respect that.
As I was saying, yeah, just turning track output off. And the big thing is, don't run commands unless you have to. Don't run them faster than you need to. Those are the two big things to take into consideration, really, I think.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that, and that is, if your commands affect the world, you're going to probably have a lot of problems with that. So I've done, like before structure blocks became a thing, I've done a lot of things that copy arenas. Like I've done a map called Entrapment that has a fairly large arena, larger than you're allowed to clone with a single command, which means that you need to break it up. And when you do, like every single clone command that you run is going to lag everybody terribly. So as a result, that map has a sort of a long-ish countdown. It has a ready check, then it does a copy of the arena, and then it has a countdown to sort of hopefully get all the clients to catch up. And depending on which arena has been chosen, that process can actually like skip the countdown. So some of the clients just go, 1, go. Because the game was so slow in getting the arena there that basically all they got was 5, 4, 4, 3. No. So much stuff is going around in the background when you copy blocks around, when you fill, when you clone, that it can really lag clients, and there's no way of really knowing if a certain client has caught up. So you can end up in big problems with that. And I had a number of versions of that map where it was crippled by the lag of stuff that was copied in the background. So there's something to really watch out for.
Yeah, actually, I think Samosaurus might have an interesting insight into some of the problems with models, because there's been a thing with durabilities on tools, right, causing a lot of issues.
Yeah.
That might be worth bringing up, because that's something people working with models ought to know about.
So one thing I want to talk about quickly first is that if you're getting into command blocks, I would say don't necessarily worry about the efficiency at first. Try and just let your creativity sort of flow. And then once you've got some experience and know what you're doing, then try and work on improving the efficiency and looking at all of that. Because in planetary confinement, it was some of the stuff there was pretty dodgy, but it was kind of just my first map. And in the end, it kind of worked. But if I tried redoing that, I could definitely do it a lot better now. And I think with command blocks, you're always learning new methods and new ways of doing things. And especially with the number of updates that come out, there's always new techniques to learn with every single new update. And what Sparks was saying with resource packs is if you have sort of 3D models, try and cut down as much on the sort of elements inside a model, because that can sort of add up very quickly, especially if you're using a large number of those models in a map. And also in terms of if you have a tool with sort of damage values and then different models assigned to those damage values, that can also cause a lot of lag that we found out fairly recently. And so it's just a case of just trying to cut down on things wherever possible.
Speaking of new techniques on saving on performance, one of the developers on the Game Mode 4 server, SpiderRobotMan, who couldn't join us today. You want to talk about it?
No, go ahead. Okay. I'm just glad you brought it up.
He's developed a new system because on the server we have a whole bunch of clocks that run once every second. And the problem was that they were all being run at the exact same time. So he's developed a system that would spread out all of these clocks over the second. So one on the first tick, another one on the second tick, and that really improved the performance on the server.
Yeah, I was surprised, because I always thought that getting all the performance, the processing done in a single tick would be better, because all the other ticks for that second will be free. But it turns out that actually spreading that calculating load of the command blocks across the amount of time you have really did help. So if you're working with a lot of different command block systems, or you're making a map and you've got lots of systems running, it's very easy to make just a clock which just pulses all of them at once. But actually spreading that out and having them at staggered intervals actually really helped when we were with the performance issue we were having. So that's something that I only just recently learned about, which might be useful to people.
Okay, so
I did have more performance rants in me. This is great.
always. If you want to hear performance rants, talk to Sparks. Yeah, so that's something you just recently learned. We learn things all the time about what you can do with command blocks, especially with the new things like structure blocks. So I'm just going to pose this question to all of you, basically. Assuming that we keep what is in the game now and don't sort of wish for new things, where do you think command blocking will go next? What do you think is the next big thing?
I do think that we touched on it earlier. The new structure blocks will introduce quite a lot of new things, because as you were saying earlier, with like the cloning command, that can be sort of brought down quite a lot with structure blocks. It's something that no one seems to have really done anything sort of super amazing with yet, at least not that I can think of. But I'm sure sooner or later someone's going to come out with something incredible, and then it's going to sort of start a whole new wave of people messing around doing things with structure blocks.
Yeah, trying to think about how Mojang treats this sort of thing. They're probably going to break everything. And then they'll give us a lot of new stuff to play with that we're not supposed to play with. That's the way it works. So I feel like perhaps with all the stuff going on with Realms at the moment, they might start bringing out more things which will let us target players more directly. That could be an option. I'd be personally quite happy to see the ability to control and modify players more. That'd be quite nice if you could give them different attributes like jump height, or you can already do that to an extent, but for example, just changing, I don't know, stuff.
Also changing like mobs, so you could have a sort of custom zombie that looks a bit different and isn't affected by like healing potions.
Yeah, the panel that they were bigging up at the opening ceremony, thanks for coming to this one instead, guys, was talking about for the Windows 10 edition, they are going to be allowing us to remodel mobs now, which is going to be quite nice, and change their AI. So maybe we'll get that for the Java edition as well, we'll see.
We can only hope.
All right, anybody else? No more. I can add on to, I think structure blocks is going to be big. Like I mentioned before, I have a few ideas that seem to me like they should work, but I don't know if they will. But like, imagine the combination of structure blocks containing command blocks could be something that is extremely powerful. So for instance, if you have a structure block containing a line with a sort of auto-triggered command block with a chain on it, then basically you have kind of a function call. Right? You can instantiate or run this structure block. Whatever happens to be that structure block placed in that location right now will instantiate out into the world and run a sequence of commands. And I don't think anybody has really explored what that kind of means. Because it could mean that you don't necessarily need to have all of your command blocks in your world all the time. Maybe you just bring out the structure block with those commands whenever you need it, and you could even have the sort of variable things you'd store in a certain location, a structure block containing some code that you want to run, and then come back to it later and run that code, depending on what you've done previously. And it could open up new ways of structuring your command stuff that would enable things. I don't have any like concrete example of what we could do, but it seems to me like that could enable us to do things much more dynamically, save data, save something that does something specific, but later on. Because right now you have to do that with a tag, or you have to save a scoreboard value, and then once you want to run it, you have to look through all of the possible tags and all of the possible scoreboard values and like kick off the correct command sequence. And if you could avoid that, then I think that would be that could bring a lot. It would potentially reduce the amount of commands. If I thought this through more, it could reduce those 100,000 command blocks for the Predator by a whole lot, I think. All right, so Sparks was in on one, sort of being able to change the command, use commands to change player data. Other things on the wish list for Mojang, which of course they'll listen to because we're here, right? So top wish for new things in command blocking.
Honestly, I think it's to be able to sort of customize sort of mobs more deeply, like you can do with the version they're displaying currently in a different hall.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit. I've got a big list, but I guess at the top right now, I'm almost thinking it would be really nice to have an entity that is specifically for marking points, kind of what we've used armor stands for in the past, or even further back than that, wither skulls, and now we use area effect clouds, but something that doesn't render, it has no real properties other than marking a point and being executable upon, because even using area effect clouds now as markers, they do stack up as entities and cause a lot of frame rate drops and performance issues. So just something that has no rendering or anything, it's just a position point, would be really handy actually, even to expand on things like your function calls and things, where you can start to use those comfortably in command block systems without worrying that they're starting to lag out your system.
Personally, on my wish list, I would put more commands specifically for chain commands. You can already do this, but just compact it down into one command. For example, like a wait command, where once it gets to that point in the chain, it would wait X amount of ticks and then continue, or maybe a go-to command to go back or forwards in the chain.
Yeah, the sort of thing which takes a couple of command blocks at the moment.
Yeah.
I think at the top of my wish list would be a sort of way to ray trace easier. So that's when you sort of detect where an entity is sort of looking, and so probably be able to teleport an entity based on that direction that a different entity is looking. I know it's been done in the past by a few people. I can't remember quite who. But it takes a lot of command blocks at the moment, and it would be really nice to have sort of some way of condensing that down and doing it easier.
All right. I have actually, like, previously made a video with a suggestion for new scoreboard commands, which would basically allow you to read and write data to NBT, to data values, and get that data into or out of a scoreboard, which would mean that you could do a whole lot of things, like do math on a whole lot of data and then put it back into the data of an entity. And it would allow a lot of things to happen that are currently somewhere between impossible and extremely hard. For instance, the Predator stuff could be reduced by like hundreds of thousands of blocks if we could just, the problem with the Predator that led to 100,000 blocks is I've calculated which color my boots are supposed to have. There's no way for me to say, take this value and make boots of that color. The only way to go is the value 1? Okay, then make this color. Is the value 2? Okay, then make this color boots. 3, this, 4, this. And every single one of those is its own command block. If we had this kind of ability to read and write directly to entity data, all of that would reduce to a single command block. So a massive amount of power when doing certain stuff that interacts a lot with data inside of entities. Another thing that changed between 1.9 and 1.10, I believe, is that they removed the integer version of the health of an entity. So you can no longer read that. It's now a floating point value, which means that you can't really test for it properly. But if we have this, you can read it into a scoreboard and manipulate it whichever way you want, make an entity that is almost dead, make it have X amount of health without having to use like a crude tool like a certain potion or a certain thing to just affect it on second hand. It's something I would like to expand more on at some point. I have some ideas of how it could be more general, but if we got those 2 commands, basically, it's a read and a write command, then that would make life a whole lot easier in many situations when we're making complicated commands that affect entities, basically.
I believe we just got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, we're basically running out of time. We have, what we could mention just before we end is like some tools, good tools and resources if people want to get into command blocks more and if they want to, be more efficient at making command block things. What top tool?
I really like MC Stacker. It's one of many item generators, but its real advantage is with books, especially when you're working on collaborative pieces. You can export the book as XML and send it to other people and sort of save it like that. So I really like that as a book editor, actually.
I really enjoy MrGrotto.com. Mr. Grotto is a YouTuber, but his website is so helpful for content creators. Even something as silly as a check brackets tool lets you know if you're missing a left or a right bracket. But he's got many, many other tools, and they're all so helpful.
I would say that if you're starting out with command blocks, then the wiki is actually definitely the place to go. Because when I first started out, I was literally just going through the whole list, seeing what each command did, and then just trying to apply that to a sort of command contraption or something. And I think if you're trying to learn where to start, then that's definitely one of the places you should go.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that the wiki is so incredibly useful. It's a super long page. We have some info up here as well, contact for all of us. And there's a page somewhere here.
Yeah, accidentalgames.com/minecon. We're going to put a list of all of the tools we've talked about, maybe a couple of others we found useful. So if you want to kind of list and you want to get started with some of these tools or thought they sounded interesting, there'll be information on that page. And there's links to us as well if you want to ask us questions on Twitter or see some of the stuff we've done. It's all on there.
Yeah, so if you want to talk more, we'll do a talk somewhere outside. I don't think we can stay in this room. But we're always open to answer questions on Twitter or on the YouTube videos or whatever.
Or come
And
find us around the conference.
yeah, we'll be around.
Yeah.
If you want to meet up, throw a tweet our way, and we'll find some way of making it happen. And if, like Spark said, if you want to get into it, take a photo of this, go to that address. We'll put up links to the tutorial series. We'll put up links to the tools. We'll put up links to all the helpful things when you're just starting out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.